And so we bring in our legal eagle from Cover 3 podcast, Bud Elliott. And last week we learned that Judge Claudia Wilken delayed the House settlement approval over roster limits. We'll get to the specific issue of roster limits in just a little bit. But obviously this House settlement, all eyes were on rev share, rev share, rev share. So how does this delay affect that?
All right, so there's still a really good chance that this gets done by the end of the summer on the initial timeline that we had. Judge Wilken said that, hey, y'all, my preliminary approval of this did not mean that you were automatically going to get final approval for this. She did give some, obviously, like some questions that she had to give to the NCAA as far as the roster limits. When do they need to actually be implemented? Are they going to be permanent? And I think she basically kind of walked the NCAA down like an obvious timeline and way to implement it that maybe she thinks she could. It also makes it look like the settlement was given more due consideration by the judge before she just stamps this thing as, yep, looks good to go, right? If she gets some suggestions for it, looks like, hey, this was, some due diligence was done, some actual feedback was given, and the settlement was improved for all parties, and maybe some of the guys who weren't represented, like some of these walk-ons, are now a little more represented and accounted for, especially in some of these Olympic sports, with the suggestion that, hey, yeah, the 105 and all that kind of stuff, fine with that more down the line. Let's kind of slow walk that thing and maybe implement it over the course of a 4 or 5 year span. So I think if you're working in a front office right now, you're like, what number are we actually going to be at this fall? But it's not going to hold up the whole House settlement, I don't think.
Yeah, her concerns are valid because, as we've already seen, this is happening. These front offices are preparing to get down to that 105 number. Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State actually spoke on this last week. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, obviously we've already informed some of the guys that they're not going to be in the 105, and that was just because you don't have to tell them until August. Well, they can't transfer in August, so you're just going to tell a kid in August he can't play football, and then it uses a year of eligibility. That's wrong. We can use up to 120, and there's really no limit in camp. But we're not going to do that because I don't think that's right for the kids. I think what's right for the kids is give them the bad news now. And if they want to go play football, they can go play football. I didn't make those rules, but I was not about to hold those guys here, use them for fall camp, and then get rid of them on August 30th. That's just not right.
I mean, Bud, the reason that I wanted to show that clip and we're talking about this on Transfer Portal Palooza is because I just keep imagining there are players that couldn't find roster spots. So how does this, maybe those preemptive cuts, affect some players' ability to now find those spots?
It's a great question. I mean, ultimately, it's going to come down to how do they implement this slow roll, if that is indeed what the NCAA ends up doing, coming back to the table, agreeing to that, so that this settlement can get expedited and approved and implemented in time for this 2025 college football season. Obviously, some teams were definitely carrying more than 105 when you account for all the walk-ins, a lot of teams actually. So you may end up having more spots on some teams this fall if you include some of the walk-ons, if this thing is rolled out sort of piecemeal as opposed to just all right at once. So you may end up having a few more spots, although obviously not as many scholarships, most likely, the way I read it, what she said.
Yeah, and another thing that we discussed with this spring transfer portal window and just the transfer portal cycle in general is that all these teams were offloading a bunch of money because eventually they were going to be held accountable. So how does this potentially affect spending?
Well, certainly, it could be very difficult to get all the review done of all these deals in time for fall. Like an expedited timeline, I don't know if this clearinghouse is going to have time to operate within this space. No, I think all these teams are really smart to try to front load these deals and get them in all under the wire, so to speak, before this clearinghouse, which is going to be done by a major accounting firm, is actually implemented. Of course, we also think that's probably going to get challenged in court. I don't know if it's going to hold up in court, but we do know that per the terms of the deal, if you got your stuff done before the clearinghouse was even implemented, obviously it's grandfathered in as good to go under the old system. So I think that is here to stay. If this thing did get pushed back so much that it's not implemented until 2026 football season, then you have even bigger concerns there and probably more wild spending next year.
Pushed back. I feel like that's a term we hear a lot when it comes to lawsuits. And once again, here we are. Bud Elliott, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Once again, the ultimatum has been set to May 7th. So maybe we'll get some clarity here in about a week. But you can listen to Bud on the Cover 3 podcast. It's almost summer, which means it's almost time for some summer school. Learn about all the major programs and get ready for the season with the Cover 3 podcast. Coop, take it away.
Smoke, I feel like I should have gotten a law degree. I don't know why I went into player personnel and recruiting and everything else. My head's getting ready to explode. I saw a couple seasons of Suits, but I'm not prepared for this. So let's talk some football. Obviously, given your experience, I'm a little interested to kind of get your opinion on how do you navigate such a space of uncertainty in your position where you don't know what you're going to be able to carry on your roster, what that looks like, and then being able to balance short-term, long-term, and then most importantly, the players benefit of this as well.
Coop, I don't. And that's what most head coaches are saying, and most personnel guys are saying as well, too. I sat down and I made several phone calls over the last month and a half just to try to get some understanding of what they're really going through in each building. There are some teams that truly benefit off of really good walk-ons that can help you in your 120. And now that you're telling me I got to get rid of 15 good players that I know are going to be beneficial to my program, how do I set my practice? Case in point, at the University of Maryland, they have the thing called 3-spot. You know what that is. You have first team, second team, and third team on 3 different fields. And that's to help out the development of everyone on the team. Because Coach Loxley's thing was I never wanted any player to be sitting around without them being able to get coached or valuable reps. So if I have to cut it down to 105, now the practice plan totally changes. I have to go to now either 1.5 or 2 spots where I only have 2 teams going against each other. Now how do I struggle in practice? I can't get enough reps. My young guys aren't going to get developed at the speed that I once thought they were going to. So that affects my roster. In terms of being a general manager now, instead of filling those spots with walk-ons, the third team offensive lineman, the third team or fourth quarterback, that 6th or 7th running back that you send down on practice squad or that look team to give that defense a good look, you don't have that anymore. And now when you talk about how much can I spend, what is my cap number? Well, you're just wishing, hoping, and spending. But again, we just talked about a lawsuit, spending, players getting promised money that might come back and make you look like the bad guy because the money that you thought you were going to have allocated to that player is now getting cut short.
Let me ask you a question about this. You have 85 scholarships. That number goes to 105. You could carry 125, I believe, with the walk-ons. What happens to these guys? And then how do teams that get the additional 20 scholarships, what do they do with that? Because my first thought on this is not everybody's going to look at the back third of the roster and say, well, we're going to try to find the type of walk-on caliber talent that can come in here and give us a look. I think teams are going to look at those 20 spots and they're going to look at it from a developmental standpoint and say, all right, how can we find guys that one day potentially end up growing and developing as potential starters in our program?
But it all depends on what school that you're at. If you're at a school that can afford to have developmental players, yes. But you and I both know those developmental players, you're not going to be able to coach them because the second that they get into a game, a year or so, guess what, Coop? They're in the portal as well.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You and I are both on, like, wake us up when it ends, right? It just seems like one of those things that continuously drags out, so we'll see what happens there.